welcome you, those who have already logged in. This is Waypoint Church Partners, and it is our Waypoint 55 webinar series where we are trying to navigate ministry together with churches and leaders on ministry-related topics in 55 minutes or less. We've been doing that just for about a year now, and the topics have been great, and the participation has been more than we expected. So we're glad that you are online with us here today. I saw the roster here earlier this afternoon and know that there are several friends of mine that are on this webinar today, but also very many people that I have not met before, and that's a plus for us. One of the reasons why we're doing this series. And so our topic today is about soul care, how ministers can thrive for the long haul. And so Waypoint exists to serve the churches primarily in our region, Virginia, North Carolina, surrounding states, joining states there, churches and leaders navigating ministry together. And one thing that we know very clearly is that very often the one thing that gets the navigation is needed the most is in the life of a minister, that he gets turned sideways or stalled out completely. And we hope to come alongside them and help them navigate ministry together. And so that's our topic today. Before we jump into our webinar, I just want to tell you a little bit of details about our webinar platform here. There is a question and answer button at the bottom of your screen. Hopefully you'll see that. And please, if you have questions for our panelists, any of our panelists here today, type them as soon as you think of them, because they'll go in a queue, and we should have time at the end of the session to be able to answer your questions that are in the queue. And if any of your questions do not get answered during our 55 minutes, we have them then in email form to where we can reply to you after the fact. There's also an automated email that's generated tomorrow as a follow-up to this email, where we may provide links to you, both to the panelists' email that you see today and other links that we may refer to. And so hopefully you'll watch for that email for us tomorrow. Another feature of the webinar that we may only use once or twice is a polling feature. And just to take a practice session on that, what I'd like to do is to launch a poll right now, just to find out how many people are joining us today on our webinar. We know how many computers are logged in currently, but often there's more than one person per computer. And so I'm going to launch this poll and just have you kind of take a quick attendance so that we get a sense of how many people are joining us today. So go ahead and chime in there. We can see the results. Panelists, nod your head if you can see the poll as well. All right, good. I didn't know if they could see that. All right, well, I want to share one, oops, where did I go? Share the screen very quickly here. And just give credit to our ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, who is the sponsor of our annual webinar series. So they're our sponsor all year long. They too are helping to drive ministry in our region and beyond. And so we're thankful for their partnership and their sponsorship of this webinar series. We couldn't do this without them. And so I want to introduce to you this morning, or this afternoon, and it's afternoon where you are as well, a friend of mine, Matthew LaGrange, who is the director of His Story Counseling and Consulting, Coaching. He's going to tell you his story. But we met, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago at a church planting conference for church planting directors. And I have to admit, the first time I met him, in the back of my mind, I thought, why is he here? He's not a church planting director. But after meeting him and now working with him in several assessment centers, like he's currently in Texas today as we speak, I realize the huge importance it is to have a counselor who understands ministry and ministers and can help them get unstuck and help them move forward in their ministry. And so he's the ideal person to be leading our session today. And so without any further ado, I just want to go ahead and give the mic to Matthew and let him introduce himself.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon. It is afternoon here in Texas, and I think it's probably a little warmer here than where you are, but I'm not going to gloat, because that's not kind of how I do things. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a clinical psychologist. I have a PhD from Purdue University, and I have been a counselor now for almost I've been for 28 years since I saw my first client. So I've been doing this a long time. I've earned every one of these gray hairs on my head. I was ordained in 2003 and served for almost 10 years at Highland Meadows Christian Church, which then became Compass Christian Church. You probably have heard of Drew Sherman, who is our senior pastor. He is the president of North American Christian Convention this year, and so if you have a chance to come and join us there, that would be great. So a little commercial for that. That's unpaid, but it's a friend of mine, so I'll throw that out there. I was responsible when I was on staff for a number of different ministries, but one of them was a counseling, quote unquote, counseling ministry that started in 2003. We were seeing about 5 members of the church at a time, and so it wasn't all that robust. But over the years, it's grown, and so from 2003 to 2018, we have grown from 1 counselor to now 26 officially on our roster. We now see north of 700 people from our community and actually across the United States every single month. And so that's just one piece of what we do. As Tim said, I am currently working today with a team of assessors for a group that is going to be planting churches all over the United States. And so I'm on a break now, so I've got to make sure that I keep my time well so that I can get back to that. But really, really happy to be here today to talk to you about what I see as a huge issue for the church as a whole. As a matter of fact, I think it's a critical issue that we need to really be intentional about addressing. And so I want to start, if you don't mind, by doing just a really quick Bible study. And I know you guys are all pastors, you know far more theologically than I do. So if I butcher this, just show me a lot of grace. But I'm going to ask you, and because of the format, I'm going to go ahead and answer the question, but I'm going to ask you to think about what is the first human crisis recorded in Scripture. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a second just to think about that, and then I'm going to tell you what most people answer. Okay, so immediately most people go to Adam and Eve, which is, we all know, is found in Genesis chapter 3. And in that, that was a huge crisis, that separation from God. So sin entered the world, and fallenness was a huge human crisis. But it's actually not the first, unlike what most people think. It's actually the second human crisis. The first crisis you find in Genesis chapter 2. You just go back 1 chapter, and you find where God said for the first time something wasn't good. And that thing that he said that wasn't good was that man should be alone. My whole ministry is built around the idea and the ideal that we as counselors, we as coaches, we as pastors, we are God's answer to the crisis of aloneness for those people that he brings into our path. And so that aloneness piece has been so formative, not just for my ministry, but honestly for me personally. I have come to realize over the last 15 years of being in ministry that some of the loneliest people that I know are pastors. And that is in large part because of the nature of the work that we do and the structure of the church. So if you think about this, I'm telling you stuff that you already know. Okay, so if you are in a place where you're struggling with something, who do you go to? And I know a lot of you are saying, well, I just go to my elders. They're a great group of guys, and they're there for me. They've got my back. Yeah, that's all well and good for most things, but there are some things that we really would struggle going and sharing with our elders. Say we're struggling with pornography, or say we're struggling with there's a woman who sits on the front row and she always dresses provocatively, and I'm kind of attracted to that. And going to your elders and talking about that may be dangerous because they're your boss, and so they control that. So what do? A lot of us kind of internalize that. Then we look at, all right, well, we could go to other people on our staff. We've got other staff members who are in the trenches with us. They understand what we're going through. But if you're the lead guy, then you're talking to people who are your subordinates. And so there's a power differential there. I can't really go to them. And if you're not the lead guy, I can't go to my boss and tell him what I'm struggling with, because, well, then we're in that place too where my job is on the line. And then lastly, I'm not going to go to people in my congregation and be really open with them about the things I'm struggling with, because it may be somebody else in the church and I don't want to give them a bad name, or it may be something that I personally am struggling with. and that's going to hurt my reputation and could affect my connection with other people going on in the church, or may affect their relationships with each other. And so I'm in an environment where I am, by the nature of the job, I'm alone. And I know some of you are really resonating with that, because you're going, yeah, I'm in that place. I have struggles going on with my in-laws, or I have struggles going on with this elder, or I've got struggles going on over here, but I've got nowhere to do it. But I'm a pastor. I'm supposed to have all my stuff together. And so I'm just gonna bury it, and I'm gonna forge ahead. And that's a real problem. That's a real problem for us, because what we do is we just keep going and going and going until we can't go anymore, until we burn out, until we crash and burn. And so in my experience, ministers are some of the loneliest people that I know. And when God says it wasn't good for man to be alone, he wasn't just talking about the members of your church. He wasn't just talking about your family. He was talking about you too. And so I'm gonna share my screen here real quick, and I'm gonna kind of run through. I'm gonna run through some material that I think will be helpful to you. Here's some things that I know. The average span of ministry currently is less than 3 years. So people who come into ministry, they stay for less than 3 years on average. Okay, now that I know some of you have been at it for years and years and years. Others are brand new, they're just now starting, but they leave for a variety of reasons. Some leave because of the isolation. It's been so fascinating, even this morning working with the church plant couples that are here. They're here for different reasons. Some of them are here because they've been so mistreated by the traditional church or where they're at now. They're looking for anything to do something a different way. Some are leaving because they've been hurt by members of their church, or from, it could be anybody. It could be family things going on, family dynamics. It could be their elders. It could be they're getting sideways with their staff. It could be that they're just running, busy all the time, and don't have time to take a breath. And so we see them leave due to isolation and emotional damage. We see them falling victim to moral and ethical failure. We see so many ministers who feel unqualified or unprepared for ministry. And if we were to do a poll here in the virtual room, what we would see is that probably most of you feel that your family gets the short end of the stick, that they're left out in a lot of things. They're negatively affected by the work that you do. And what we do is so important, it's so critical. We share the good news. Unfortunately, a lot of times we don't live it. And so we don't experience that personally. Our families don't experience that personally. And I've long said to people that I've worked with that the number one ministry that you have in this world is not the church that you've been called to, it's to your family. And if you're not ministering effectively there, man, we've got a problem. We've got to do something about that. A lot of ministers say they don't have any close friends. A lot of ministers say that they're not able to ever live up to the expectations that their church has for them, their elders have for them, their family has for them. And so they're constantly feeling disappointed and isolated and alone. And then the truth is, very few people understand the uniqueness that comes from being in ministry. You know, we do live life in a bubble, but it's a really strange bubble. And, you know, I talk to people all the time from other areas of life, and they say, you know, as a minister, you really only work 1 day a week. And then they laugh but honestly, there are a lot of people that believe that. And most of you know, this is a 24/7 job, kind of. And even though we say we set these boundaries up, these ways of being more healthy, we still really struggle with it. And so I want to share a couple things with you today, really kind of about the importance of self-care, the reason why we're even having this conversation. And then I want to challenge you with something at the end, which is to do something about it. You know, there are a lot of places now, and I just read an article this last weekend about, we got to stop talking about self-care. We got to stop talking about soul care. And I was like, what? And then I read it and it said, yeah, we got to stop talking about it and we've got to start doing it. It's kind of like when you go back to New Year's resolutions and we put out these great things. You can't see me. I'm 6'5", I'm 260 pounds. Okay, I'm 270 pounds. I'm a big boy. And I said, hey, I had to look over here because I've got somebody laughing in the next room who's saying, yeah, you're a little heavier than that. And my New Year's resolution is I'm going to get my weight under control and I'm going to start working out, multiple times a week. I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to start doing those things. And what is it they say? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. We find ourselves in that same place where we have intentions of taking care of ourselves. We have intentions of setting appropriate boundaries, of living a healthier life, of modeling for others what we talk about on Sunday from the pulpit or in whatever area of ministry we're in. But it's a struggle, and we end up falling short. And so this year, I want to provide you with a way to do this differently so that you can have some ongoing accountability, some ongoing help in pursuing wholeness and pursuing taking care of you as a pastor. Because the truth of the matter is, you can only take care of others as well as you take care of yourself, or you're going to burn out. You're gonna crash, and bad things are going to happen. But when we talk about the importance of self-care, I want you to think about this way. Nobody argues that we all have physical needs, that we have needs to eat, to have food in our diet, to have good intake. Nobody argues that we need to drink water or that we have the physical need for air. You can only go so long without air before really bad things happen, right? The truth is you can't do without sleep either. And so none of us would argue that those things are important. But there are these things that I call relational needs, personal needs, spiritual needs that we also have that are just as important to what we do as those physical things that we talk about. And God created you with those needs. It's not like he said, hey, you've got to eat, you've got to drink, you've got to sleep, you've got to do those things. And if you do those things, everything will be fine. No, he created us, he hardwired us with these needs for relationship. And all we have to do is go back to that Genesis 2:18 verse to see that. He created us with a need for relationship. And so some of us, and I would dare say probably most of us that are on this webinar, struggle in that area of community, of connection, of relationship, because we have to hold ourselves apart, or at least we choose to do that in ways. And so if God created you with these needs, with these relational needs, with these connection needs, then it's got to be okay to get those needs met in a healthy way. Now, there are a lot of ways we get them met in an unhealthy way, but God created us with needs. He's not going to leave us without a way to get them met in a healthy way. It's not selfish to take care of yourself. In fact, it's selfless, because the more you take care of you, the better you're going to be able to do your job, the better you're going to be able to care for those in your ministry, the better you're going to be able to be a good husband and a better father. And so, those are all things that I want you to understand. This isn't just, something I can put off till later. It's something you need to do today. As a counselor, I have for years been kind of the stop of last resort, where the wheels come off the bus for a pastor, or in a relationship, or there's been an affair, or there's been all this stuff, and I get this frantic call from an elder or from somebody else on staff saying, hey, I need you to step in here and I need you to fix this. Can you fix this? That's the worst time to try and fix something, because at that point it's probably already too late. the damage has already been done. And so what I want to encourage you to do is to take a step back and instead be proactive rather than reactive. I want you to get to a place where what you're doing is you're being really intentional about taking care of you so that, fill in the blank, you can take care of others, so that you can be there for your wife, so that you can live to walk your children down the aisle, so that, all of that kind of stuff. And so, it was interesting. A few years ago, I was at ICOM, actually there in Virginia. And so it was just 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago. And I was approached by 5 different ministry leaders, all different people who came up to me and said, Matt, we know what you do. We know this person that you walk with, this pastor from here that you walk with. How can you make what you do one-on-one? How can you make that available? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have a clue. And so that kind of sent us on a journey of trying to figure out how can we come alongside ministers and really help them and be proactive and have it be cost effective and all that. And so we're going to share with you at the very end of our discussion today, Parisos, which is a ministry that we started for ministers, using actually this platform that we're on, Zoom, as a way of creating safe, authentic relationships with other people who actually understand what you're going through. So there are ministers who, in different parts of the country, who may be not of the same denomination as you, who actually probably are not of the same denomination as you, that can evoke some safety and community where you can actually talk about and wrestle with the real issues that you're facing. But before we get to that part of it, which is, kind of a giant commercial, and I'm laying that out ahead of time, but I want to talk to you a little bit about, I'm going to give you kind of 3 practical steps of things that I would encourage you to do to move from where you were, which is kind of going along at a frantic pace, to where I think God is calling you. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen, and then I'm going to actually put it in.
Matthew, while you're pulling that up, I want to interject again to remind our viewers today that there's a Q&A button at the bottom of their screen. And so as you're sharing here, if they have a question that they'd like to get into the queue for later in the session here, that's the place to do that.
Yeah, and we do welcome whatever questions you may have. So I'm going to give you a famous 3-point outline here, okay, of things that I recommend that we do in order to start turning the corner on this idea and ideal of taking care of you, okay, of that self-care piece. And one is, we need to adopt God's rhythm of life. If we go back and looked at Scripture, as I remember it now, my mind as I get a little older is a little more fluid, but as I remember, God created the world in 6 days. There were 6 days that he worked. And then there was the 7th day. And that was different because on that 7th day, God rested. He didn't need to rest. I mean, he's God. He didn't have to do that. But that was a way of modeling for us. Now, guys, we preach this on Sunday morning, on Saturday night, on Sunday night, whenever your services are. You preach this from the pulpit, but how many of us actually live that? And so I'm going to encourage you to adopt what God has laid out. Now, something else I want you to think about, Randy Frazee wrote a great book called Making Room for Life. And in that book, he talks a lot about kind of the rhythm of life in biblical times. And he used the example of the Bedouin shepherds. And, you know, basically our work day was from sun up to sundown, sun up to sundown. And then after the sun goes down, then there's a period of time before sleep where it was relational time, it was social time, it was dinner, it was connecting with others around the campfire. It was doing things that really kind of refreshed their soul. And then there was sleep. So there was kind of that work life that was normal, and then there was the social time, and then there was the rest time. So we had both rest, refreshment, and restoration that all kind of took place in the normal span of the day. And then the light bulb happened. Now, I know I'm kind of skipping through a whole section of history there, but we live in the most technologically advanced state and period of history ever. All these things are supposed to make our life easier, and transportation and technology with computers and websites and cell phones, and now we can't ever get away, it seems like. And so, we need to kind of dial back the clock to the way God intended for us to live our life, the rhythm that He wanted us to have for our life in order to move things forward. And so I really want to challenge you to look at what rhythm of life are you living now? I want you to stop and really kind of just analyze what your day-to-day life is like, not just your work life, but the life that you have with your kids and with your spouse. And are you pouring time into that, or is it you've got nothing left when you walk in the door at home? And it's, instead of being a place of refuge and strength, it's a place where the battle just continues. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, I want you to find activities that refresh. And so I'm going to give you 3 ways to think about doing that, okay? One is I want you to take breaks during the day. So if you take every day, you take periods of time where I'm working, and then I step out because I need to take a breath. I need to go get a cup of coffee. I need to go and socialize about the ball game last night, and or the Super Bowl that's coming up. I need to just kind of talk about that with somebody, or the Celtics, or whoever it is. I just need to kind of get away for just a short time. And so on a regular basis, on a daily basis, I need to take a rest and I need to take a break. But I need to do this regularly in terms of having more of a prolonged period of rest, not a 15-minute step off, kind of sharpen my axe, get back in and do things. I need to take a day that I'm leaving work at work. And I'm being serious about this. I'm talking about having a whole period of time where you're disengaged from the relentless pursuit of the Sabbath, because it comes every single week. It's coming, whatever it is, whatever role in ministry you have, there's something that you always have to be on for, except God says you need to take a Sabbath. And I know how some of you are. You're like, oh, well, okay, I'm going to be kind of flexible on my Sabbath because sometimes it's this and sometimes it's that. That needs to be the exception rather than the rule. So for you to get good at this, you need to do this on a regular basis where you are setting aside a day of the week, and you communicate that to your staff. You communicate that to the people in your ministry or the people of your church, where you say, this is a family day, this is a Sabbath day. And you really want to model for those who are around you what it looks like to take care of you. Because if we keep saying the words but don't live them ourselves, then we've lost all credibility. And so I really want you to think about that. And then I want you to abandon annually. Take a vacation. Some of you haven't taken a vacation in years. And if your wife was there or your spouse was there, they'd be going, yeah, come on, let's take a vacation. And your kids are going, yeah, let's take a vacation. It can't be just any one of these things. It needs to be all of them. You need to take breaks. You need to take a Sabbath. You need to take vacations. And unless you do that, you're in a place where you're not really healthy. you're not, I say this line all the time. You need to create an environment where good things are more likely. The world isn't going to bring that to you. Okay? You have control over one piece of this whole equation, and that's you. You can't control your elders. You can't control your staff. You can't control the people that come to your church. You can't control life, but you can, and some of you have a problem with the word control, so let's use the word manage. You can manage yourself. You can manage your schedule. You can manage how long you will allow yourself to be engaged in certain things. You can manage whether or not you take a break. You manage whether or not you take a Sabbath. You know, all of those things are within your control. And so, you know, one of the things that's really convicting is I think a lot of us are afraid to take time off or rest because we feel so responsible for success of our ministry or for the production of the weekend. But in essence, by doing that, by taking that all on ourselves, we're not actually trusting God for our success. And if we're not trusting God with that success, then what we're doing is we're sinning. And if we truly ask ourselves why we're working so hard or pushing through, it's because we think that we're necessary to the success of whatever it is we're doing, that God can't do it without us. And friends, that's a lie that we buy into. God doesn't need us to be successful. He just invites us along. And to be at our best for him, we need to take care of ourselves. So a couple of things that we can do in terms of creating an environment where good things are more likely is we can learn to set boundaries. That it's okay to say no. It's okay that sometimes our best yes is a no. That we say, no, I don't have time to do that, or I don't have the energy to do that, or I need to do this to rest, reflect, or refresh and restore. So I really want to encourage you to learn how to set boundaries. And then I also want you to learn to seek community. This is something that's an intentional process for us. You go, I've got all kinds of friends. I've got all kinds of people who are asking me to do all kinds of stuff all the time. That's different than intentional, healthy relationships. And some of you are going, I don't need any more community. I don't need any more people because you're more introverted. The truth is you need healthy community. You need balance in your life. And so what I'd like to do then is I'd like to kind of turn my talk just a little bit then to kind of what we're doing now and what his story has recently launched, which is a new program called Perissos. And Perissos comes from John 10:10. Probably a lot of you already knew what Perissos is, but it comes from John 10:10, where it says, the thief has come only to steal and to kill and destroy. But I have come that they may have life and have it abundantly. And so that abundant word there is the Greek word for perissos. And that abundant life is not just something that is for those in your church. We want that same abundance to be something that you can experience as pastors. And so after 2 years of a lot of soul searching and looking at different platforms and looking at different ways of doing things, we've come up with a program that we feel like really kind of meets those needs that we've talked about, which is intentional, regular community with others who understand what we're doing. And so let me tell you what, if I can take just a moment, I'll tell you a little bit about what Perissos looks like. We've broken it up into 12 modules over the course of the year. So each month has its own theme. And the themes are built around kind of 4 core areas. One is spiritual formation, one is leadership, one is self-care and relationships, and then one is marriage and family. And so each month you will have one kind of topic, and we have an expert in each of those areas who is going to do a teaching. That teaching is somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes long, and that's posted on our website. And you can go, and if you join Presos, then you go and you watch that video, and then each week you meet with a small group of 4 to 5 other pastors from across the country. The same 4 to 5 people, they're gender-specific groups, so 4 to 5 men or 4 to 5 women are in those groups, and a trained facilitator walks with you. And each week in that month, you go deeper into what does this lesson have to do with me and my life, in my context, in my church, in my family. How do I go deeper, and how do I have some practical steps to follow related to that? So that's the first thing. So you enter into relationships with kind of a core group of 4 to 5 leaders, an hour each week, where you learn, you listen, you grow, you support, you encourage, and you pray for one another. And then the facilitator's job is to kind of walk you through a series of kind of thought-provoking questions where we want to turn this into a practical application time. And some of you are going, an hour a week? Are you kidding me? Did we not just cover that our lives are busy, that we've got a lot of stuff to do? We don't have time for an hour a week. And here's what I want to say to you. You're lying to yourself. You need this time. It's so critical. It's so important that we think you have to set this hour a week aside in order to engage in a healthy community, a healthy relationship with others who can help you as you help them walk a life that honors God, that honors others, and makes you more effective in ministry. Because I'm tired of getting those phone calls from elders and church leaders saying, hey, I need to tell you about what just happened, and we just lost a marriage, or we just lost a minister because of moral failure, or because of they just got burnt out. And you see these stories all the time in the news. I'm so tired of seeing that and hearing that. And then the other thing that we've done on our site is that we've provided a whole lot of resources, book resources, and we've got webinars and access to blogs and articles related to relevant issues that you're facing as ministers. So, what we're trying to do is make it so that you're not alone in doing the ministry that you do, that you're empowered, that you're given all of the resources that you need in order to be as healthy as you can be. One of the things that I love to see on there, we actually have some resources that basically what we're doing is we've got some places that offer discounts for ministers, and so we've got those resources available on there too. So some bed and breakfasts, some conferences, some different things like that that you have access to. So so that gives you just kind of an overview of what the program looks like. And I know some of you are going, all right, well, that all sounds great, but what does it cost? And what I'll tell you is we worked really hard to make sure that it was something that an average minister could do, which I know a lot of you get paid, and so I understand that. If you have to go see a counselor, you're going to probably pay somewhere between $120 and $135 a week. And that's more than most of you can afford, and I understand that. And what we've done is set this up because it's a web-based platform, because of what we've been able to do with some partners. It's going to be $129 a month for you to participate. If that's something that you're interested in, I'll put up a website here at the end. If you would like to do that, you can get some information about that. But right now, we've just launched it in January. We're trying to test the technology. We're trying to do a lot of other things in terms of kind of the process and the flow, and Do we need the teaching to be in a different format or different style? And so we're offering a pilot price right now. So if you want to come in and join what we're doing, we've reduced the cost to $89 a month. And so that's a $40 a month savings if you want to be a part of that. If you join at the $89 rate, that's your rate from then on. So that will never change. So, there's no time limit. If you get in and you experience it and you go, it's not really for me, it's not my thing, that's okay. You can stop at any time. So it's not like you're locked into it forever. But we did want to make you aware that this was a service that we offer. It's something that we're real excited to have as a part of what we're doing. So that kind of takes me through what I wanted to cover. So Tim, if you want to come in and moderate the.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. We do have a couple of questions that we want to dive into, and want to remind folks if they have questions for Matthew to go ahead and chime in with those now in your Q&A button there. One of them that I think is really critical, going back to what you said about people taking a Sabbath,
right.
And one of our guests wanted you to elaborate on what exactly is a Sabbath. I do have a poll I can drive that I didn't get to jump into.
Okay.
Just asking people how they would kind of evaluate. How do I get to that? Here we go. How they are doing on their Sabbath to rate it. So I'm going to launch this poll right now. But the question is could you elaborate, as a counselor, having seen people that don't Sabbath well, how do you define Sabbath for someone for a pastor in a healthy scenario?
Right.
What's the profile of what starts to look good?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to get into the theological underpinnings of Sabbath because most of you could argue me under the table, and that's not my role. But here's what I will tell you. My understanding of a Sabbath is it's not a couple of hours. It's not, I'm just going to set my stuff over and not look at it. I want to be a part, or I want you to take a full day. And by a full day, I'm talking about 24 hours. Okay. Some people say, no, it's just a work day. I don't care. You need to be able to set that aside. You need to set your work life aside for a full day, because I believe that's what God did on the seventh day. He says a day, that's 24 hours, where you don't have meetings, you don't take phone calls, you don't respond to emails, where you really separate yourself. Now, some of you are going, gosh, I've got a cell phone, it's always on my hip. Yeah. I remember the very first time I preached, where I said, I know that what I do is really important, and I know that that you guys want to get a hold of me, but something that I've started to do to show value and honor my family is that I turn my phone off at 9:00. And I don't know that I even finished saying that before a line had formed out where, you get to go shake the hands and stuff, where they were forming to yell at me about the fact that I'm a minister and this is a 24/7 job. And don't you understand that there are crises that happen? Crises happen. Life happens. But you guys know how often crises happen. I mean, it's an always thing. And so if you do a good job of communicating to your staff, if you do a good job of communicating to your congregation about the importance and the need of taking a day away from work, then you'll get less complaints. It won't eliminate it, but you'll get less complaints about taking that time if it is reflected in, you're better at what you do because you've taken the time. And so I think it's really important to take a 24-hour period where you disengage completely from work stuff and engage in relationships, doing tasks around the house, doing things with your spouse, all of that kind of stuff. Okay.
All right. I think I can share the results of the poll, but what we see there is more than half of the people on the call today, on our webinar today, would classify their Sabbath as a 1, 2, or a 3. So less than half would say it's either productive or peaceful as far as being restful and restorative.
Right.
And that's actually probably better than we would have guessed, because, or most of us are not very honest, one or the other. But that's the results of the poll there. And
Well, I think in part there, Tim, it reflects that what Productive says, usually somewhat restful. Usually somewhat is, I would not say it rises to the level of what we want to try and achieve.
No, that's right.
Especially not on a regular basis.
Yeah, only 2 out of a whole bunch of respondents said it was restorative.
Yeah.
94% would say otherwise. And so
right.
that's pretty telling, which is why we have our session here today.
Right.
Let me see if I can, for the few minutes that we have left, let me see here. One question that I think we do want to address, and I want to introduce very quickly Neil Wheeler, who's one of our panelists. And at least just say hello, Neil. If you say hello, your face will come up on the screen. Kill your mute button there. Unmute you there. There you go. Neil, can you say hello to all of us? And
hello, guys and gals. Good to be with you this afternoon.
Tell us your role at Waypoint.
Sure. My role at Waypoint is Director of Leader Care, and I get to hang out with a lot of pastors and different types of staff people all over the region, as well as heading up our peer learning cohorts that we call fusion groups, kind of face-to-face groups that just help guys and gals be able to do ministry together.
All right, thank you. And so Neil, one of the questions that we had, one reason I wanted to introduce Neil at this point is someone asked, what's the difference between what Matthew described for these group? Matthew, what are you going to call your Perosis groups?
10-10 groups. They're John 10-10 groups. So
okay, 10-10 groups. That because we have more than 40 fusion groups around the region, right. And so some of what you're describing might be accomplished through our fusion groups.
Right.
There's some overlap, but they're also exclusive in what they're intending to do.
Right.
And so you're somewhat familiar with our fusion groups, and right. So maybe you can speak to that, because we love the value of our fusion groups, but we don't want to say our fusion groups are going to accomplish everything that a 10-10 group will accomplish by any stretch.
Yeah, and this will also address, I think, Greg's question that he has on the Q&A too, about the difference between embodied or disembodied, online versus in-person groups, because we're dealing with some kind of crossover things, and the two different groups are really designed to do some different things. One of the reasons why, first of all, the research really reflects that as long as you can see the people that you're talking with, there's not a big difference between online versus in person, which is fascinating to me, which I really challenged for a long time. But the research has been pretty consistently clear that as long as you can address the verbal cues and the visual cues, the nonverbals, by being able to see the people that you're engaging with, there's really not much of a difference. Actually, it's a minimal difference, not statistically significant difference, between physical presence and virtual presence. So that addresses that issue. But you know what you're doing in the fusion groups, I think, is great. Here's one of the issues that I see, and one of the reasons we were very intentional about setting it up the way that we did, is when you meet with people that you know, then you're less likely to be as open. It doesn't feel as safe if it can somehow come back to, having grown up in the church and been around it. I'm going to say something that may be a little offensive, but there's a fair amount of inbreeding in our brotherhood, in that we all know each other really well. I know people all over the country, and so when I talk to one person, it's like, well, I know them and them and them. So if we put you guys in the same group, then if one person knows something in that group that knows all of these other people, the safety of that group is gone. And so I'm not going to be as open. I'm not going to be as transparent about the issues that I'm struggling with. And so we intentionally created our groups so that they're cross-denominational lines, so that they are in different regions of the country, to make that a safer place for people experientially. You'll get to know them at a deep level over time, and so those relationships will be deep and connected. Now, how do I know that? Because I've been in a covenant group like the 1010 groups that meets once a month. I just don't think once a month is enough. So the underlying need of the fusion groups, or the reason you do those, there's great value in those. I appreciate the fact that that Neil is somebody that was hired by Waypoint. It was very intentional that self-care was a big issue, and that was something they saw as being really important. And they actually hired somebody to do that. The problem with Neil, and not Neil in particular, but that position, is that he's one person for however many pastors exist in your brotherhood. And from what Tim said, we're talking about 250 churches, which represents somewhere between, I would guess, 3 to 5 pastors or ministers on average at each church. All of a sudden, we're talking about some of you are by yourself in the church, but sometimes you're on a church staff with 10 to 15. We're talking about a whole lot of pastors with one person being responsible for the soul care of all of those people. And it's just not manageable for any one person to do all that. And so that's part of the reason why we structured ours the way that we did. And I don't think you can have too much community in that sense.
That's right. Well, let me interject there here as we're wrapping up our time. We try and keep our webinars to the waypoint 55 and 55 minutes. So with the couple of minutes that we've got left, I want to share just a couple of things. First of all, I'm thrilled with what you're doing, because there are too many pastors that I get to talk with, Neil gets to talk with, that are just empty. I had coffee 2 weeks ago with a pastor who is no longer in ministry, recently was in ministry, and he just said, I was completely empty for the last 2 years of my ministry and no one knew, and I was playing a game. And so I'm thrilled with what this is. The critical thing for this session today is what you said early on, was that we've got to quit talking about it and start doing something. And so whether you contact Neil Wheeler, whose email address will be on the follow-up email tomorrow, that you can contact and say, help me figure out how I need to help myself, or the email address for you, Matthew, with Parosis, and getting involved in a very intentional group just like this to take care on a weekly basis, soul care. We've got to do something. And so that's the question for everybody that's on this webinar today, is what are you going to do? Because the 94% of us are saying, just by one metric, that our Sabbath is not as good as it ought to be. And so we didn't ask polls about how restorative our vacations are, and how restorative we've got moments of every day that keeps us flowing throughout the day, so that our soul is healthy. So the question is, what are you going to do? And we just want to let you know that Waypoint exists to help not only churches, but leaders navigate ministry together. And so if we can help you do that, that's what we're here for. So contact us via the email tomorrow, and we want to do that. I do want to share the screen about 2 or 3 little things as we're closing. It's the same every time that we gather. Our webinar series is, again, thanks to our sponsor, Mid-Atlantic Christian University. We want to give them props for being our partner in that. And I got to move us over here. A couple other things. This is a free webinar. You didn't have to pay to sign up to get into it. The only thing that we would ask is that you consider being part of Waypoint, their new platform, giving platform for individuals, which is iplantchurches.com. We've got more than 100 churches around the region that support us financially, but we've launched a new campaign to have hopefully hundreds and even thousands of individuals that give as little as $5 a month to help us plant more churches. We planted 6 churches around the region last year, and we are trying to get individuals and families that say that's a part of who I am, $5 a month, $10 a month. So there'll be a link in your email tomorrow, and maybe a follow-up email that we're going to invite you to give $5 a month recurring to help us plant more churches more often to reach more people. The last thing I'll say, and then we're done, is here's our upcoming webinars that you may be interested in, but if not, we would like to have you forward the information as you get it to the people at your church that'll be most interested in our next couple of webinars. The next one that we have coming up is in about 6 weeks on March 19th, and it's for people on your missions team, your missions leader, mission committee members, elders at your church, but it's about becoming a sending church. How do we go from just sending checks to where we're helping people get on the field and stay on the field? And then the one following that, coming up in April, is for elders at your church and how you strategically recruit your future elders rather than wait till you need one and then go, now what do we do? And so that'll be a great teaching for elders and preparing to have your next class of elders at your church. Well, our time is up. It's been 55 minutes, and we're thankful that you've joined us today. Please look for your follow-up email tomorrow for some of the links that you heard about today. And we hope you join us for a future webinar. And I want to thank our panelists today, particularly Matthew LaGrange and what he's doing, trying to take care of pastors and help create an environment where pastors can care for themselves, because we can only lead our church in a healthy way as we are healthy. And so it's so critical. So thanks for your time, and we hope we see you on our next webinar. Have a great day.